Okay, so this is part 8 in a series entitled Heroku Architecture Credential by Example. This section is a continuation from part 7 video, which was about sort of an advanced workflow or more advanced workflow using the Get feature branch workflow and using Heroku review apps and continuous integration. So this time we're going to change up this and switch over to databases, and in particular Heroku Postgres database basics. And we're going to basically add a database to our application, and we'll use it in a query, and we're going to run it locally and also on our Heroku. So there's some prerequisites we'll go through. We're going to talk about local development, and then we're going to do development on Postgres itself. So let's talk about prerequisites. Let me close this down. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have the ability to run a local database. So if you look at Heroku Postgres, the documentation for it, they have a section on how to do local development, and you're welcome to follow that strategy. So basics, and where's local development? Of course, now I can't find it. Postgres, here it is, local setup. So their descript process here is involving actually installing Postgres on your machine, and they provide it for different operating systems, and you're welcome to do it that way. I actually don't like to clog my machine up with a bunch of libraries. So I use a package called Docker, which is a way to run containers on your machine, and you can then easily spin up services on your machine without really installing a bunch of software. It's really convenient. So I'm going to be using Docker, and so if you're following along, you can do it yourself with for the local install of Postgres, but I'm going to use Docker. Another thing you'll need to have is a Postgres client. So because you need to be able to interact with your databases, and there are a number of different tools. I'll let you find your own. I'm on a Mac OS. I have a command line client called PG-CLI. Again, it just makes it convenient, but you can use GUI tools too. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we need to do is get our local database up and running. Okay, that's the first step. And again, I'm going to use Docker. So let me see, documents, Heroku cert, get status. So this is basically the end of I haven't done anything more in this repo, right? So this is a clean repo from where we left off in the last example. So the first thing I do, just to save me some typing, there's a relatively short file called on my desktop called Docker Compose. So I'm going to copy a desktop, and you can pick this up from the repo if you wanted to, or you could just type it. I'm trying to do it because I'm trying to save time here. Okay. Oh, really? Oh, CP. Okay, and we'll walk through this file. It's like not too long. Okay. There's a new file, Docker Compose. So this basically is a configuration file for Docker that allows you to, instead of having to start up Docker with a lot of command line flags, right? You can actually just define what you're trying to bring up in a configuration file, and you just type in Docker Compose, and it'll look for this file. So it's just a shortcut way of avoiding a long command line string. I am going to commit this to the repo, so this becomes an easy way to kind of spin up your local environment, right? So the services that I'm going to be running here is a database, and it's going to be running Postgres version 11. Okay. Again, I chose 11 because that's the version that's defaulted support on Heroku, so I want to keep the same version. This restart always came from the example code provided by Docker on Postgres. Actually, I didn't even research what it is, so you can look up on your own. I'm guessing I actually don't know what it means. And then next thing is, I do know what this one is. This is when I set up an environment variable, right, where it provides a password called example, because you need to be able to log into your database. And Finally, there's the ports that this allows your machine to be exposes port 5432, which is the Postgres port, right? It exposes the port in the container to your machines, and then you can interact with the database. Okay, so now that I have that file here, I can just type in docker compose up. Do that again. Yep, up. Up basically brings up the service, and you can see it's actually now already up and running. Now I already had downloaded the image earlier, so it might take you more than 2 seconds to bring up a database. But once you download the images, this is how fast it takes to start up a database. Now, in this case, it's running kind of interactively here, which I don't really want. So once it's brought up for the first time, I can run docker compose. Up is bringing it up, but start is starting it after the fact. So, and then now if you do docker ps, you can see it's running. Now, if you want to stop it, just so you know, you can do docker compose stop. That's going to stop the database. Docker ps stopped. If you do docker compose down, it's going to actually take down the database and throw away all the data. So don't use down. I made that mistake earlier. So I'm going to use start, bring up the database. Database is running. Okay, so now I have a database, but then I need to kind of, the next step here is we're going to do some manual setting up some tables. So I'm going to call this the migration and seeding section. I'm going to create some tables, actually one table, and I'm going to seed some data, create some data. Later on, we're going to, in another video, we're going to improve on this process where we don't have to do this manually. But for now, we're going to do it manually. So the way we do this, we need to connect to the database. So in this case, I have a client called pg-cli. And then we're going to use a connection string for Postgres. So it's going to be let's get this right, Postgres : // Then it's going to be username, which is Postgres. Password : password was example, at localhost, port number's 5432, and the database, if you read the docs on Postgres on Docker, the database it configures for you is called Postgres. And if everything works right, I'm connected to the database. Okay. So this is a command line tool for interacting with the database. I'm actually connected to the local host on the Postgres database. You can see it right here, right? And you can see if I do / this is not a Heroku specifically. This is Postgres. /dt says describe the tables, and there's no tables, right? So the first thing we're going to want to do is kind of, again, this is the migration, quote unquote migration. We need to create our databases that our code's going to use. So here I'm going to type in create. Actually, I'm going to cheat, and I did this earlier. So let me just read it out. Create table. Okay, I'm going to create a table called to-dos, right? And I'm going to provide the fields are going to be ID, which is serial, which is a auto-incrementing number essentially. It's going to be the primary key. The second field is going to be called name. It's of type text, and it's not null. Okay, pretty straightforward. And if I hit enter, and if I do dt, I can see a table. If I do d /d, and then I'd give a name, to-dos, it describes the table. So you can see the columns, right? And then there's an index because there's a primary key. Okay. Now that we've, quote unquote, migrated the database, we need to now do the seeding, which is creating some data. So I'm going to do insert, and in fact, I think I already did this earlier. So I'm going to save myself a little typing. Let me just walk you through it. Insert into to-dos. I'm going to provide a name, and the value is A. Okay, there we go. Got one value, B, enter, and C. Okay, and to see that we actually have data, I'm going to do select star from to-dos. Okay, so you can see I've got a table of to-dos with 3 entries in it. IDs are 1, 2, 3, and name is ABC. Okay, pretty straightforward for getting our database up and running. So I'm gonna exit out of the client. Okay, so again, in terms of the repository, all I have is a Docker Compose file now there. So the next step is to write the code that's interact with this database. So there's a library called, I'm going to install some dependencies here first. There's a library called PG, which is for Postgres, which allows you to interact with the database. So, and then I'm going to do npm install, just because I know this doesn't provide any TypeScript typing, so I'm going to do types PG. Okay. Okay. Now this, you could actually write code, just so you know, that using PG to directly write queries against the database. I mean, if you look up the manual, there's PG, node, and then there's documentation. Okay. And you can make it work. The problem, I actually started to do this earlier because I thought this would be the easiest way of doing it now. But it turns out that the data you get back from PG is not the easiest to consume. And it's just harder to work with. So there are libraries called query builders, one of which is called Connects. If you look around, this is a pretty popular library. Basically, it's a generic query builder, and it works with all sorts of different databases. And the beauty of this is, through this interface, you can now write safe queries. It's free of SQL injection. And of course, you still can do things to screw yourself up, but if you follow the proper patterns, you will avoid SQL injection, and it's particularly easy to consume the data using this library. So we're going to use this library for interacting with the database. So npm install. There may be other ones, but this is the one I've been using, and I Googled around for node-based SQL builders, and this came up as kind of one of the top choices. So install Connects. And off the top of my head, I can't remember if Connects supports typing. So I'm going to leave it. They do talk about TypeScript, so I'm going to leave it alone for the moment. And if I have to install the types, I will in a minute. Okay, so next thing is, okay, so one of the things that we're going to do preemptively before we write our code is we're going to set up an environment variable that has a reference to our database. This is because in different environments, right? Locally, we're going to have one database. When we're running in staging, we have a different database. And when we're in production, we have yet a different database. So the way that we're going to do this is there's an environment file. So I think I've already added this earlier, so I'm just going to add it. Yeah. I actually did this in my pre-work. So now I'm going to use, let me make this bigger so we can see what's going on here. Okay, so this may look familiar, right? This is the same URL that I used a minute ago to connect to the database, right? And I called the environment in particular database underscore URL, which seems like a natural choice. It's actually a very particular choice because it happens to be the same environment variable that Heroku will use when we go to run our databases in Postgres. Our Postgres databases in Heroku. So I actually chose this name very particularly. Okay, so there's now in my local environment, when I'm running my app, I have an environment variable called database URL. Right. The next thing is the code itself. Now, what I'm going to do is I've already wrote this code earlier, and I'm not going to just drop this code on you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of build it slowly and talk about it as I go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, see if I can get this to work. Desktop, new server. Okay, so I have two files here. One's called new server and one's called server. I'm going to bring up my editor. And what I'm going to do is we are going to do something. I'm going to say select for compare and then compare with selected. See if I can get this to work. Okay, I'm going to make this a little smaller so I can see what's going on here. Okay, so so the left code is the new server, the new code, right? And you can see I've added some stuff, right? So all I'm going to do is on the right side, I'm going to just add the same things. So let's see if I can get this to work. Well, I guess I can't edit. Oh, I thought I was going to be able to edit here. Oh, I can edit. Okay. Import KNEX from KNEX. Okay. So now I've got that the same. Okay. Let me add in interface. Let me type it, and then I'll explain what this is. Number and name string. Okay, so okay. What this here is, this is TypeScript, and I want to, just for cleanliness, I want to type my results of to-dos. Remember, and a to-do consisted of an ID, a number, and a string, a name, so that makes sense. Now I need to get a copy of this database URL, so I'm going to do const database URL equals process. Okay, so this is basically just pulling the database URL out of the environment, right? The next one is a little bit of typing, but okay, I'll do it anyway. So there's a little bit of setup for connects, right? And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to make sure that a database URL is, if it's undefined, I'm going to basically bomb the app. Because I really don't want this app starting without a database, right? So ES lint, I'm going to have to figure out how to avoid typing this much, but okay. And disable next line, console log, error, database, URL not supplied. And then, okay, so then I'm going to do process exit 1. So what this is going to say is, if the database is not defined, I'm going to bomb the app, right? Now that I know that at least the URL is defined, I can now actually use it. So const pg equals x, and then client. So I'm telling it that the kind of database to use is the PG library in particular, and it's a Postgres, right? And then the connection, so they actually use it, this, by the way, this connect uses PG under the hood, if you hadn't guessed. Database URL, okay. And what am I missing? Okay. Okay, so then I can delete this. I leave this alone. Oh, I have to add a space. Okay, so now I have the code's getting close, right? So I've basically set up connect. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, to be honest. Now I'm going to need to create a new bit of code here, and I'm going to get lazy here because I'm tired of typing. You're probably tired of me typing too. So let's see if I can just paste this in here. Okay, so boom. Now let's talk about it a little bit just to make sure you understand the code. Let me collapse this down. So this is creating a new endpoint called to-dos, right? This is asynchronous because pulling the database is an asynchronous operation, right? And I'm calling pg select. I'm pulling the ID and name from this extra bit of business here, that's the typing. So I'm actually getting back a to-dos object, right? And I'm pulling from the to-dos table. And then I just turn around and send the to-dos out. I don't really do much with them other than just send them out to the output, right? So now if there's an error, for example, if the select didn't work, I'm just throwing an error saying to-dos query failed, and then a return of 500. That's it. So that's now the same code. So let me save this, save. I'm going to throw away new server and move the trash and see if this is, okay, this looks like it's good. Let me just verify one more time. I was a little bit annoyed that little get now it's happy. Okay, so the source code says it's happy. Why is this generating an error message? Source tsconfig. Why is it not? Oh, I know it's wrong. I'm not in the right folder. Okay, I was bothered by the error message I was getting. So in this case, now it's probably not going to have a problem. Okay, so right, my TypeScript definition file, I didn't open the project from the root, so it was complaining about my TypeScript. Okay, so basically now this code should work where it connects to the database, and if I hit this endpoint, it's going to give me back the to-dos. Let's see if this actually works. So the way I need to start this though, because this is running, remember that environment file, right? I just can't just run this because I have to have the environment variables. So that if you remember right, how we did this before was there was a command called Heroku local, but in particular I actually configured my npm run watch, which is my kind of local development way of doing it, to actually use Heroku local under the hood. And if it all works out well, okay, found an environment file, listing on port 5000. So if this is working, I should be able to go to localhost 5000. Okay, so that's my hello world where that worked. But now the question is, does it work if I say to-dos? Hey, look at that. Work, no errors. I have my to-dos. Let me blow this up. And I've got my 3 to-dos out of the database. Okay, so we are at the point now where we've done our local development, right? Now we need to, let's commit this real quick, and then we need to kind of focus on getting the Heroku environment set up. So let me do that before I forget what I'm doing. So Control C, close out of some windows so I'm not so distracted. And I can throw away my code, these files, because I've already used them now. Okay, so git status. Okay, so I'm going to git add, git commit -m, database. Okay, now what I don't want to do quite yet is push this up to Heroku because I don't have any databases set up there and I don't have the environment variable set up either. And so I know this code will crash. So I'm going to pause for a second just to get myself a cup of coffee. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, we're back. Okay, so I'm ready to push, but I don't want to push quite yet. What I need to do is go to my Heroku account and basically do the same sort of manual steps that I did locally to first create the database, my staging environment, and then to create the tables, and then create the seed data. Again, there's going to be better ways of doing this, but for now we're going to do this manually, right? So the first step is going to resources, and you notice I only have one add-on, so I'm going to type in Postgres, and I'm going to use the free Postgres and hit the provision button. And just so you know, I'm going to do all this separately off the video for production too, so that this is going to be done twice. So now I basically have Heroku Postgres here, and see this attached as database. So let's look to see what that means. So this word database here is, if I go under settings, reveal configure variables, see this database URL? So that database is the first part of this, and says, oh, this database is, and then this is the actual connection string that we, just like we use locally, this is the connection string. So either way, so this is how you can connect to the database. So I can copy it from here, right? And because that's the next thing we need to do is we need to connect to this database and create our tables, right? So that's one way of doing it. I believe, let's see, you can also do, actually, maybe not Docker. If I'm in here, so if I do git remote, this is tied to, oh, I don't even have this tied to the staging database. I could, there's a way to do this called, I think there's a command called Heroku database I'm going to run out of energy here to do this, but you can actually list the databases from the command line. So this is called Heroku, cert, Barkin, Tucker, STG. It might be databases. No. I'm going to look it up real quick since I've already started on this path. I don't normally use this command, right? So there's a ton of command lines for using provisioning, using the CLI. Oh, it's Heroku PG. Okay, I guess I should have known. Heroku, hip arrow. Oops. So it's PG info. And right, so this basically tells me it says that there's a database URL, and then it tells me the plan that's available, right? There is a way to actually get the connection string out too, so I'm not quite sure. I don't have Postgres on my machine, so I can't use this PG-PSQL. Oh, well, there's a way to get out. I don't remember the command. Promote, credentials. Oh, here you are. PG credentials URL database. Okay, so I have to do PG credentials URL. Then you have to give the name of the database. Okay. I type this. So there's the connection URL right here. This is the same thing I copied when I went to the environment, right? So I can copy that here too, right? Okay, so long way around. The way I normally do it, by the way, is I just go to the environment variables on the app and look for the connection string there. What I need to do though is I need to also create my tables here. So I go PG client, and I can just paste this here. So these databases, oh yeah. Well, that's not happy. What is that about? Okay, I'm going to pause this for a minute because this normally works. So let me pause real quick and troubleshoot this for a second. Okay, well, I just Control-C, typed it again, and it was fine. So there was something transitory about that. So I'm going to connect to the database, right? And if I do, and the name of the database is this weird, it's a weird database name, right? And if I describe the tables, again, I have no tables, right? So the first thing I wanted to do when I was doing this was to create the table, right? Again, this is the migration. And I can probably save myself a little bit of typing because my editor will actually keep. So creating the to-dos table, and then I'm inserting, insert into to-dos. Oh, I don't know why it's not out of, okay, whatever. Insert into to-dos, name, value A. I think it's values. Right, and then I do it with B, C. So I have a table, select star from to-dos. Okay, so again, now I have a to-dos table. Has its data, right? Let me exit out of this, quit, and I'm gonna kill this. Oops, I probably didn't mean to do that, but so the point here is, let me close down this. So now I have an app, my staging app now has a database, right? Just like my local environment did. So let me go here. I have a database, right? It is connected using an environment variable that my code is expecting to use. and I logged into that app, migrated the data, quote unquote, made the tables, and then did the seeding, which is basically created the data. So if this works the way I hope, now just so you know, I'm not going to use review apps for the moment. We're going to have to do some more work to get review apps to work with this. That's a separate video. I'm just going to push directly to staging because I'm an admin, right? So let me go do that right now. So cd docs, Heroku cert. Okay, so get status. All right, I'm one ahead. Okay, so I'm going to push this to my GitHub because I have it auto building on off of pushes to master. So git push origin master. Okay, and what that's going to do is push it to GitHub, right? And that should then turn around and do a build. Okay, it's actually doing a test right now. So my continuous integration is running, and then now also my app build is running. Okay, let me let this play out for a second. I can look at my logs though, so let me get ready to look at my logs. So I'm going to do Heroku logs app this. What I can also do is I can do a tail. So I can just watch the logs, watch my service come up. Okay, it's up now. Right, okay, looks happy. I don't see any errors here. Now the question is, they actually work. So let's find out. So if I go to here, open this URL, right? So there, okay, there's my, right? There's my hello world, right? Okay. Now the question, the real key is, will to-dos work? I don't know, I think it's 50-50. Hey, look at that. So now I'm actually pulling it from my Postgres database that's in the staging app. Okay. Let's see if there's anything more. Okay, I think we're basically done. So let's see, this kind of, so basically now it was somewhat painful because I had to do these manual steps to create the database, to create the, the table and create the data. But I'm able to now develop locally, right, using Docker. And then I can also push that code up to my staging environment, and now I can run the database and run the application there. After this video is over, I'm going to actually do the same steps on production. So now my staging and production are all aligned. And well, we'll start with that, and then we'll do another video after that. So I'm going to stop the video for now, and then there's another video after this.